Hey YouTube, what up, young world? It is Strass Daddy, and it's a continuation, a part two of a previous video where we dive into some hypergeometric calculations and we discuss turn one place. Today is going to be a very special episode. So, I have a guest who's going to go over some once upon a time probability, and I'm just going to give you all just kind of a refresher on where we left off, and then my buddy Carador will get into how to begin to use once upon a time in your calculations. So for those who don't know, and if you don't know, now you know. Well, you won't know now, but you'll know now after this. Shut up, Mark. All right, we have this card. It's called Once Upon a Time. This spell, it's the first spell that you cast. So if you led with a mana dork and then draw this later, it's not going to work. But if you lead with this as your turn one play, or if you don't make a turn one play and you draw this turn two, it is free. You get to look at the top five of your library, reveal a creature or a land. So it has to be a creature or a land, and you get to choose one of them, and you put the rest at the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is a card that does change the probability that I went over last time, and the probability that I went over last time looks something like this. So we look at our total one drops that are green, which is going to be 11 in this case. So remember 11. And then we're going to look at our total green lands that we can tap on turn one in our sample deck here. And I believe it was 15 for this deck. Let's see if I am correct. Yes, it is 15. We are not including Talongate because you cannot tap Talongate for a green land on turn one in this deck. Same with Dryad Arbor. You cannot tap Dryad Arbor for a green land on this deck. We are not including Scrubland because Scrubland says add white or black. So we can't use it to get these. Okay, I know, Mark. I'm not stupid. My bad. So we have 15 and 11. So we would use my hypergeometric workbook here. We would turn to this tab, which, by the way, I've updated this. You would go, the number of lands is 15. The number of turn one plays was 11. And you would say, okay, I have about a 67.4% chance of ramping on turn one, or, you know, Reclaimer's not technically a ramp, but you get the idea, right? 11 here and 2 Reclaimer. Parador is going to get into Once Upon a Time ways to look at that, because this will not help you calculate that. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to go over some of the changes that I made to the hypergeometric workbook. That will be time stamped. And check out Carador. So Carador has a YouTube page and a Twitch. I think it's just Carador, like the card. And I'm going to leave that link in there. New father, somebody who hasn't gotten to stream too much, but still the love of the game is there. So check him out. Low key, chill guy. See, I do memes. Low key, chill guy. All right. Yeah.
First, I'd like to thank Mr. Strassdaddy for the invitation to collaborate on a fun topic like this. For those of you, or probably all of you, who don't know me, my handle is Carador. I mainly play Maverick, and I post a lot about it on the Maverick Discord, although lately I've been working on this devoted Druid brew that I'm really into. But if you couldn't tell, I love playing creatures, and I love casting Green Sun Zenith. So let's get into it. Once Upon a Time is probably the greatest consistency tool for green that has been printed since Green Sun Zenith. But much like Green Sun Zenith, I think there's a few traps we have to avoid falling into. Let's take a look at Once Upon a Time and try and analyze its role in our deck. We get to dig 5 cards deep and pick the best creature or land we find, either for 2 mana or for the very low cost of free. So at its absolute ceiling, We're casting Once Upon a Time for free and turning a decent hand into an absolute banger. There's a dip in effectiveness, turns 2 to 4 or so, where we probably don't have the mana to both cast once and deploy what we find, so I'd say that's probably the floor. But then after that, once you get your mana under you, the card usually reads 1 colorless, 1 green, speed run to your best draw the next 5 cards, and cast it. Compare that to Strast Daddy's Precious Sylvan Library, which costs 2 mana no matter what, and only sees 3 cards at the beginning of your next draw step. In his words, cringe. I tend to follow Hello Newton's lead on how many copies to play. Right now, 3 is the magic number. If you don't know who Hello Newton is, do yourself a favor and go check out his VODs on YouTube. His deck techs at the start of most leagues are a great source to learn more nuggets of deck building wisdom. If we play 4 copies, there's a 40% chance of seeing one in your opening hand, or roughly 2 out of every 5 games. With 3 copies, it drops to 32%, or about 1 in 3. For me, 3 copies has struck a balance between seeing them in my opener, as well as not drawing them until later in the game. So there's some argument, I would say, to playing 4 copies to maximize your opening hands with them. But in my experience, I end up drawing them too much on those weird, awkward turns I mentioned earlier, and so I've kind of stuck to 3. I would not play less than 3, though. We do want to see it in our opening hands frequently, so 3 I think is the minimum. Let's talk about some deck building and gameplay traps that you could fall into with this card. So I think there can sometimes be a tendency to think, I have this free tool that lets me dig for creatures and lands. That means I get to skimp on stuff, and then once upon a time will just bail me out. I don't think that's necessarily correct. We still need to respect our mana base and our primary game plans. So take care of your mana will take care of you. Even though I'm playing upon a time to fix my hands and find what I need, I'm still going to play an adequate amount of core cards in my game plan. So for me in Maverick, for example, that's 4 Knights and 4 Thalias. We also want to make sure we play enough creatures and lands to give us a good selection of choices out of our 5 cards. 45 hits in the deck gives a weighted average of 3.75 choices out of 5, which is pretty good. Almost 4 of your 5 cards will be hits and potential options to fix what your hand is missing. With 4 removal spells, 4 Green Sun Zenith, and 3 copies of Once Upon a Time, that leaves another 4 non-hit flex slots to work with, which usually is plenty. Going down to 40 potential hits is still likely acceptable, providing on average 3.33 choices per 5. But any lower than that, I think we kind of want to question whether we should be playing Once Upon a Time at all. You might want to be looking at Sylvan Libraries instead. Sideboard construction is another area where we can leverage the power of Once Upon a Time. So by including effects similar to the spells you might want, but staple to a creature, you can increase the consistency at which you find these effects in crucial games 2 and 3. However, there are some effects so powerful that it's probably not possible to replace. So one example here is Graveyard Hate. Instead of Surgical Extraction, you can consider Fairy Macabre. Both cards are very similar, a free effect that can strip a key card from the graveyard, except that with Once Upon a Time you get 5 extra looks at finding a fairy. However, neither of these cards can replace the powerful effect of Leyline of the Void. So at a certain point, you need to weigh the power of your sideboard options versus whether you can find it on a creature or not. The last thing I want to touch on with regards to Once Upon a Time is Keepable hands. It can do a lot to fix your borderline hands, but you really need to know what you're getting yourself into if you're going to lean on it to find the right thing to make your entire hand function. Again, there's no hard and fast rules to this because it's very contextual, but I do have some sample hands here that I generated that we can go through and kind of talk through why you may or may not want to keep them. So this first one here, we have 1 land, we have some spells to play early, we have a Green Sun Zenith, and we have a Knight. Pretty good, except that our 1 land is a tapped land, so we essentially need this Once Upon a Time to find us not only any land, but it needs to be an untapped land that probably we can tap for white or green. That's kind of a lot to ask of our Once Upon a Time. I don't know if I would keep this hand. It's kind of sketch. So for me, I think this one is a mulligan. So this hand's looking a bit better. We have our lands taken care of. We have removal. We have something to do with Thalia. This collector oof could kind of go either way on whether it's good or just a literal 2/2 with no text. So with this, we're kind of lenient upon Once Upon a Time to find either a mana dork to start putting us ahead on lands, maybe a wasteland we could play with that Thalia. Probably looking for like a 3-drop or something to play after the Thalia. So this hand's borderline, but I think I would keep it in the blind. This last hand here is probably like the best example of what Once Upon a Time can do to just take like a pretty good hand and make it excellent. So we've got our lands taken care of, we have removal, we have something to do with Thalia, and we have 2 Green Sun Zenith. So this Once Upon a Time, we could be looking for either a mana dork to save those green suns to find things later. We could be looking for land number 3, and honestly, that's probably what I would go for because you really do want to be able to hit your land drops as well. And we already have 1 Green Sun Zenith to go find Dryad Arbor. The other option is you could look for something like Wasteland, so that opens us up to like Green Sun Zenith for a Dryad Arbor, and then turn 2 play Thalia and waste your opponent. Super powerful. But yeah, this is what I was talking about when I'm saying Once Upon a Time can take a pretty good hand and make it absolutely great. So let's move on to Mana Dorks and turn 1 plays. So being a Green Sun Zenith deck in Legacy means we really can't afford to take a turn 1 off. It's important to have an appropriate density of proactive turn 1 plays that either accelerate our game plan or slow down our opponents. What do I mean by proactive plays? So the best example of this is the Humble Mana Dork. It's probably the best first turn play on average for us, as it jumps our mana development ahead by a full turn. That lets us cast our more powerful spells earlier, lets us play around days, have some insulation from Wasteland, or make our own Wasteland cause even a greater mana disparity. Another example of a good turn 1 play is like Mother of Runes. She threatens to invalidate multiple cards in our opponent's deck and make combat a nightmare, pretty much demands an immediate answer. However, proactive turn 1 plays don't have to be creatures, though. Spells count too. So Thoughtseize is a great example of a proactive spell. We get knowledge of our opponent's future plays, as well as a chance to pick apart what they're trying to do or protect our own game plan. Removal, like Swords to Plowshares or Lightning Bolt, are examples of what I would call a more reactive play. They kind of are hoping that our opponent does something so that they have some value. So normally I would say this is not a strong turn 1 play to consider. However, with the advent of the MKM Surveil lands into Legacy, now at least you can hold up that fetch. If your opponent does something, you can respond with your removal. If they don't do anything, you can go find a Surveil land and at least filter your next draw. Personally, I've settled on a minimum 12 proactive turn 1 plays being more or less what I'm comfortable with. So it's about 80% chance of having one in my opening hand, not counting extra consistency tools like Once Upon a Time or a mulligan. And this is not counting removal in that number as well. So we've determined what our proactive play is. We've determined how important they are to our strategy. Since we're talking about Green Sun Zenith deck building, let's zoom in on what I said was our best proactive play on average, turn 1 ramp. So Green Sun Zenith is truly fantastic as a consistency tool. It's ramp in the early game, extra copies of our best creature in the late game, and with the added bonus of being able to find relevant silver bullets as needed. So here I've calculated the probabilities of having a turn 1 ramp play, assuming we're playing 4 copies of Green Sun Zenith, and then with a varying number of mana dorks. So simply looking at the numbers, we would correctly assume that by playing more dorks, we would have a higher certainty of having turn 1 ramp. But I think also it's important to acknowledge the context of a mana dork in our deck. There's diminishing returns to playing a high number of them, unless you have a way to utilize them even in the late game. Otherwise, they're just dead draws. For example, playing Equipment allows any creature to become a threat, or Natural Order turns flooding on dorks into a lethal board state. So we need to think critically about our core game plan, how the dorks fit into that, and then how well we utilize them in the late game to come up with an amount that we're comfortable with. I can't really provide any hard or fast rules on this. Of course, like everything else I've been discussing, it's highly contextual and it's different for every deck. And it's also different for your tolerance for risk. So personally, I have liked about 5 dorks in my Maverick and kind of mid-rangey builds, just to provide a frame of reference. Uh, for me, it's a good mix of um, early game plays without limiting my late game plays. So if we look at the chart here, it's about close to 70% chance of having a turn 1 ramp play. Anyways, I hope this information is useful as you embark on your deck building journey. Huge thanks to Strass for inviting me to collaborate with him. I had a lot of fun thinking about the topics, as well as making these expertly crafted graphics. So if you want to chat more about deck building or Maverick, you can always find me on the Discord. Thanks again for having me, Mark.
All right, thank you very much, Cringeador. Shut the up. All right, here we go. So the new workbook. I have worked on improving the original workbook, and I'm going to discuss how I have. So I created column H, which I'll just give you an example here. We were going with the 15 and the 11. It'll show you at a glance in column H and column K. If you were to make an adjustment of 1, what would happen? So if you were to add a turn 1 spell, we're going to go from 67.4 to 2.89 plus. So this will put us at 70.29 or something like that. Yeah, quick math. So you could see how that would go up. If we were going to go down in a land as an example, you would see that the probability of having one of both will go down by 1.82. So when I click down on land, this will go down, and it'll show you kind of like adding a spell as an example will increase your probability greater than adding 1 land with this current relationship, which I think is something that's interesting. Also, that taking a spell away will hurt you more than adding one. So perhaps some math on critical points and things like that would be interesting to get into. Okay, so let's discuss another thing. So column E, for the nerds out there who like Excel and hypergeometric calculations, I have updated this formula. The formula that I was using was giving me a difference of anywhere between 0.002 and 2% from what this formula was giving me. So I originally thought that this was just like, some rounding error. Turns out that the formula that I was using was not correct. Like I said, it was at most 2% off and frequently within 1%. So if you were using that, sorry, but it probably will have no effect. This one is correct. Correct is correct. Do appreciate some of the YouTube comments and some of the Discord friends. I think Brian was one of them in the Eternal Turtles Discord who helped me test this, calculate it, and had the guts to go, hey, Mr. Nerd, you made a video. I think your formula is close, but not quite there. So this is correct until it isn't. Next thing about relationships here, something I learned just by messing with the calculator. So let's just say you have 26 lands and you had 1 turn 1 spell. We'll go 2 turn 1 spells, right? This kind of showing you that, like, if you were to like add an additional, actually, let's go 25 because I just realized. If you were to add an additional spell to your hand, to your deck rather, you would go up by 9.16, but if you add an additional land, you're only going up by 0.11. So it kind of shows you that, like, you know, and this might be obvious to some math nerds, that, like, adding more of the number that you have less of increases your probability of having both. So, as you could see, we go up 9% here, then we go up 8% when we get there, then we go up 7%. You could see it's significant, but you know, adding the number that you have less of increases those chances. And then as you get really high, let's just say 25 and 25, you're not even increasing your probability by much, by like 0.35%. That I was aware of. The reason why 26 didn't work is because I stopped at 26 here. I can grow this calculator if there is demand, but 26 is the maximum that I added of just rows here. So that's why 26 is not populating. Okay, let's go to the next tab. It is called Keepable by Lands at the moment. And what this allows you to do is to calculate column L, which is really the big thing, which is you're not going to keep a hand with 5 lands in it most of the time. Rare. Or 1 land in it most of the time. So this is my attempt at calculating the probability of having between 2 and 4 lands in your opening hand, where one of them is a tap to add on turn 1. Okay? So let's get into it. So we're going to look at my sample deck here. This is a different calculation. My number of turn 1 lands is 15, but my number of lands is 10 plus 15. So it's 25. Okay. So we're not looking at turn 1 spells here. We are looking at the probability of having a turn 1 land and not having just 1 land in your opener, and not having more than 4 in your opener. Okay, pretty specific. So the number of turn 1 lands is 15. The number of lands in the deck is 25. We are going to have to trim 1 land. Okay, so we are going to take that 25. We're going to call it 24 because one of them has to be here in column C, like at least 1, because it's 1 or more. And we would get 15 and 24. And according to this, the probability of having at least one of both is 86.12, which is cool, right? That's the probability of having like more than 1 land, where 1 land, at least one of those lands, is a tap to add. It could be 2 tap to adds on turn 1. It could be a wasteland and a forest. It could be any of those. But the probability of having between 2 and 4, where one of them is a tap to add on turn 1, is 69.21. The probability of having 2, 3, or 4 lands in your opener is 77.84. So thought that was pretty interesting. I am working on making this more clear and better. You could see my formulas in here. So this workbook will be updated as well. I'll have the link to that. And then this here is what I'm calling lands and spells probability. So this is kind of the same question. It's your number of lands and your number of turn 1 spells, but we're going to flip it. This is not going to calculate exactly what you want, but it's going to help you. This is going to calculate the number of total lands, is what I'm going to use it for. And you can adjust this how you see fit. The number of total lands in your deck, which was 25, and the number of turn 1 spells, okay? So what we're going to look at here is the number of turn 1 spells. So let's sort it by mana value. And we're going to count Green Sun Zenith here. So we're going to go 19 to 25. And I'll tell you why this helps and why this is incomplete. 19 to 25. So 25 lands, 19 turn 1 spells. The probability of having a turn 1 in opener is really good, right? Like the probability of having like a turn 1 spell in your opener is really high. The probability of having a turn 1 land in your opener is really high. But what this is calculating is the probability of having between 2 and 4 lands, which is really what you want, and a turn 1 in your opener. And that's going to be 74.58. And this is the probability of having 2, 3, 4 lands in opener. So you may not have the 1 drop in your hand. You may not. But this calculates that separately. And then this will also show you, let's just say if you add more spells or add more lands or take them away, how that will affect column J. So what this cannot calculate at the moment, and again, any nerds out there want to help me, I'm happy to try to implement that, is let's just say your turn 1 play is Swords to Plowshares that's being calculated, but you don't have a white mana. Or let's just say your turn 1 play being calculated is Noble Hierarch, but you don't have a Forest. It's including things like Bog, it's including things like Arbor, it's including things like Wasteland and Saga and Talon Gate. So it gives you a decent view at likelihood, but it doesn't calculate the specific thing. And if you want to get more specific, you can calculate turn 1 play as an example, where you could just use 15 and 1, 15. But you can't calculate what are the chances of me having a noble or a sword and a white mana when I need the white, and a green mana when I need the green, independent of each other. I have not gotten to that. Not sure how to do that yet, but getting better and better at it. So these are the tools I created. They're going to be in the link. I believe you're not going to need a separate link for Excel with the current formula that I'm using. Any feedback, suggestions, ideas for other things that I might be able to calculate. Some big brain nerd who's really good at this stuff who wants to help me, or somebody who tells me, hey, you're close but not quite correct on these things, please reach out. Okay? All right. Thank you, and GLHF.